So hi, I can see you really nice and clearly. So welcome everybody. So as you'll have seen on some of our posts recently, we're doing a lot of our podcasts now as kind of almost mini discussions between Cheryl and I, and allowing you to see our wonderful faces. And actually my face isn't as big as it was last week. So that feels a lot better. But hello everyone.
We are socially distant.
We're very socially distant, as we all should be, as we enter into this third week of this unprecedented situation for all of us. We thought that there was a topic that's coming up a lot, I think, for us personally and in kind of the workplace, media, anything we're looking at, and that is fear, which
absolutely
is weirdly is an emotion that I think all of us feel a lot of the time, but a lot of us don't ever talk about it.
Yeah, and the fear, obviously, fear kind of like drives everything that we do all of the time anyway. But I think because we're in a situation which, you know, obviously nobody anticipated and people are really unsure of what to do, the fear thing has kind of really come to the surface. So that's why it kind of just felt really timely, I think.
Yeah, and also for us to chat through kind of the different ways that it is manifesting, because I know so many people, you know, us included, all of us are fearful, and we're fearful on different levels at the moment. So, you know, there's fearful for your health, there's fearful for other people's health, there's fearful for livelihoods, jobs, you know, when does life get back to normal? How do I get back, you know, kind of to see my family? And we were talking this morning, weren't we, kind of the big fear of the unknown.
Yeah. So let's take it back. Let's take it right back to sort of basics in terms of when we think of fear, what do we think of in terms of as a definition? You know, how can we kind of just like summarize what it is, what it means, and why it has such a big impact on people? So when you think about fear, you know, what does that mean for you? What do you think of as a definition?
Well, it's awful, but I automatically think of those really irritating definitions that you see everywhere, which is like, you know, fear, false evidence appearing real, fear, you know, face everything and rise, or all this type of stuff. And I think it's just, I hate them, because I think fear is a completely natural response. And we've had this discussion before of, it's the same with anxiety, actually. You know, the human race has evolved through its ability to fear and make appropriate changes against that. So we are the descendants. You know, you hear a rustle in the bushes as a cave person, right? There's always a stupid person who goes over to poke it with a stick, when there's other people who are like, oh my god, and run away from it. And we have the genes of the ones who ran, because they're the ones that survive. So fear at a very basic level, I think, is hardwired into all of us. And I think our very comfortable modern world has kind of got us forgetting that. So fear has now become something that we don't talk about, and we stuff down under words like low self-esteem, or, you know, fear of failure, fear of whatever. It's, for me, fear is always worrying about something that's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So as part of prep for this, I looked at, you know, okay, what's the dictionary definition of fear? So
where's the dictionary?
What does the Oxford English say fear is? So fear, apparently, it's an unpleasant emotion or thought that you have when you're frightened or worried about something. But it's interesting, you know, that story that you told about the rustling in the bushes, because that absolutely is the fear. You know, fear is there at the end of the day to keep us alive and safe. I guess where we are now is we can't now distinguish between something that is a real threat, you know, to our life or our kind of existence, as opposed to a perceived threat. And that's the fear that starts to become debilitating, because actually there's no real threat. You know, the rustling in the bushes is just a little bird or something. You know, it's not a woolly mammoth that's about to kind of come and
just me looking for my glasses. Yeah, it's fine. Me socially distancing. I have to say, wait for everyone.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I think and I guess that's the fear in terms of those, when you sort of talk about those quotes and everything, you know, the false evidence appearing real. It's the bit where the fear is, it's either a real threat or a perceived threat. But obviously, so often we can't tell the difference, and our senses are just in tune to kind of pick up on the threat, whether it's real or perceived.
Well, and isn't that the weird thing at the moment? So, you know, just on a physiological level, we go into overdrive. So you think about things that you're really afraid of, not me in the bushes, but, you know, things that we're all kind of worried about. And you can feel your heart rate goes, you know, your stomach kind of churns. I think it's really interesting that we are in, at the moment, an unprecedented time of fear. It's fed by the media, it's fed by the conversations we're having, it's fed by the very real, you know, people are dying, this unprecedented situation. And I think everybody is operating at a level of kind of baseline fear at the moment, which is making people go crazy. That's why we've got people holding bullets.
Yeah, and it's probably, you know, at the end of the day, you know, fear is a really powerful emotion, and it is there to keep you alive. Like let's not, you know, kind of beat around the bush. But I guess, and because we're currently in a situation that literally is involving life and death, you know, it's probably not surprising that fear has become heightened, and that's probably fear of everything, you know, fear of other people, fear of catching the disease, fear of change, fear of, you know, I've just lost my job, what's going to happen? All of those fears are just kind of like bubbling up to the surface, you know?
Yeah. How have you seen it kind of play out? Because I know you're in, obviously we haven't seen each other for 2.5, 3 weeks. We're in quite different areas. Have you seen kind of anything that you, I suppose, didn't expect to from people either where you are, or, you know, just kind of friends or colleagues or things?
Yeah, I tell you what's been really interesting, and obviously, you know, we'll come on to like the coping mechanisms, but I think what's the one thing that's brilliant about, you know, the British is the kind of sense of humour, and almost sometimes the irreverent humour that is necessary. It's almost like the response to that fear. It's like, you know,
the gallows humour. Yeah?
Let's like tell a joke to kind of almost like, you know, kind of pretend that this thing isn't happening. But where I saw the fear, and you sort of said something about what is it that's, you know, creating the fear and what's making it worse. I saw a turning point. So as Emma knows, and anybody that knows me really well, I'm in a WhatsApp group with certain members of my family, which is the most hilarious, the rudest and most irreverent WhatsApp group you'll ever come across. It's just like the funniest thing, like it. And so obviously, you know, the funniest memes about this whole situation have come out of this group. But I tell you what, there was the one weekend when, you know, the media were reporting obviously on what's going on, and they reported on, you know, some deaths of very, very young people who, you know, apparently had no pre-existing conditions. And I saw even the mood in that WhatsApp group change. You know, I could almost feel the fear literally coming out of that WhatsApp group, and it was because of what was being reported in the media. And, you know, I'm not a big fan of traditional media, and I don't think that the media have played a helpful role in this. You know, I think that the way that it's been reported and everything has added to the fears. And let's be honest about it, the media have always played that role. You know, the Daily Mail kind of lives on, you know, the myth of decline at the end of the day. Do you know what I mean? So the media have continued to play that role of, you know, kind of fear and everybody thinking the worst and kind of blowing up, you know, the all of the salacious elements of it. So I don't think that's helped. So yeah, I've certainly seen shifts where it's either because people are going through that change curve and they've started to realise the gravity of the situation that we're in, or it's, you know, it's the hype and it's everything, and it's seeing people panic buying, and it's the queues at the supermarkets and all of that. I haven't queued at a single supermarket yet.
No, neither have I.
You know,
maybe they stay away when they're you know. But yeah, I haven't seen that. And I think, you know, I said to you when I kind of realised that people were starting to feel afraid, there's a very distinct pattern that I've seen before. So for various reasons in my life, and for those of you who know me or have listened to the podcast, you'll know that a lot of the stuff that I really was afraid of has happened to me. So, you know, I was afraid of my mum dying. She died. I was afraid of my marriage ending. It ended. I was afraid of leaving jobs. I left them. You know, it does tend to happen.
Yeah.
And what I have noticed always is that when people are starting to feel afraid, it often masquerades in a phrase people say to me of "you're so brave." So you know how often people say to me, "You're so brave." And whenever anybody says to me, "Oh my God, you're so brave," you know, you make these decisions or you do whatever, I look at them and I think, right, you're really feeling afraid. You're really feeling afraid. Because actually often people will take their fear and push it onto you. It's that thing, do you remember I said before where, like, I have had people say to me, you know, every time I feel bad about my life, I just think about yours. And I've been like, my life is perfect.
Yeah.
Look at this, I've got sunshine books, and you know, my life actually is great. That's your fear about what's happening to you manifesting itself. And there is something I would urge everybody to do. And this isn't really a coping strategy because we'll get onto them, but it's just something around being cognizant. So think about whether your fear is showing up in different ways when you're talking to people, because actually people have got enough of their own, they don't need you to put that onto them as well. And I think this is particularly true when you've got children, but it's also really true with, kind of colleagues or friends or family, of we're all operating in a world where fear is all around us. Just think about whether you're saying something to try and lift the spirits a little bit, almost to try and scare other people,
to alleviate it. It's a challenging one, I think, particularly and I don't know whether some of this is to do with like our British culture. We're quite cynical, we're quite a cynical sort of nation. We're very good at we're very good at satire and kind of, we almost pride ourselves on that. But it was interesting, I was looking at something kind of over the weekend about business, and I was reading something where there's a particular like tech giant in the US, and he has a theory that there would be more sort of UK based, huge tech companies and huge tech unicorns that were British based if we were less cynical and less fear based. He's got a view that when you compare sort of the way as Brits are compared to the guys in like Silicon Valley and all of that, and I did say guys, and it is obviously guys, but when you compare us to that, because of that cynicism and that fear, it kind of holds us back from kind of reaching our full potential, which I think is really interesting. And as you say, there is something about how do we think about the things that we're saying and the things that we're perpetuating and the emotions. And that's not to say squash the emotions, because fear, as we've said, is a natural emotion, but actually what is it that you can say to help somebody to get through that, to lift them, to kind of like try to kind of recognize and acknowledge it, but not let's just all sit in it in misery together. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I don't know whether that's something we've necessarily mastered, because there is a difference between saying I see your fear, I completely recognize it, and I get why you feel that way, and then moving to something else, because particularly at the moment where we're all going through this together, it's an amazing experience. I'm not going to lie, I'm fearful at times, very fearful. Other point, what I have is the feeling of this is an amazing opportunity for all of us to realize how connected we are, and to kind of find that strength through fear, because human beings are hugely resilient. All of us are hugely resilient. We're the most resilient species the planet has ever seen. We're always afraid, and we always find a way through it. And I think I know you love the Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers, which is, if you're going to wait to feel unafraid, you're going to be waiting a long time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Whether that's in a pandemic, or whether that's in work, or whether that's in life, or whatever it is, we're all feeling afraid at the moment. Definitely. And that's okay.
Yeah. So that probably moves us on nicely to kind of like how we deal with fear. And I know that it's interesting because we often think about, fight or flight, as a response. But there is another one, which is freeze, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Which is what a lot of people do. We see that. Say, for example, when somebody's in a job that they're really unhappy with, but they're fearful of kind of moving to something different, they just freeze. They just go into the mode of, I'm just going to like stay on the treadmill. I'm just going to like, keep doing the same thing because I'm afraid of doing something different. So what are some of your thoughts on, ways to kind of get through it, work through that fear and manage it, because you're not necessarily going to eliminate it.
Yeah, and I think eliminating it is pointless at the moment, but what we can do is identify it. And for me, so going back to almost the rustling in the bushes, right, what I like to do is actually look really closely at what it is that I'm afraid of, right? And I've got nearly 40 years of trying to do that, and actually it helps, like breaks it down. So it's interesting. So for those of you who kind of watch these regularly, we have got some scheduled coming up where we're really going to talk about that fear, flight, freeze methodology and how you apply it to your own life as we come out of this, because we will come out of this, right? We are going to come out of this. But one thing that I really like, and it was posted on LinkedIn this week, I posted it, so have a look and see, is actually identifying what fear you're feeling. So, you know, we were talking, weren't we, even this morning? It's a feelings wheel, and you kind of say, oh, you know, well, I feel afraid, and you're like, oh, you know, that's fine. You've oops, it's my talker. I'm afraid of who's there. I'll just leave it. You know, you feel afraid of, you know, whatever you think is happening. And actually, if you can identify exactly what it is you feel. So I'll give you an example here. One of the elements of fear here is, are you feeling insecure or are you feeling anxious? And then can you dial that down? So if you're feeling anxious, are you feeling worried or are you feeling overwhelmed? Yeah. And actually, when I think about that, it's a really, really helpful way for me to get to, okay, I'm not feeling afraid. What I'm feeling is insignificant, or what I'm feeling is inferior, you know, and it really helps to kind of pin it down. And then I can think, okay, so what is it I'm actually afraid of happening? And I don't drill too much into imagine the worst case scenario and how do you deal with it, because I think that puts your body into a state of kind of sympathetic nervous system goes crazy, and it's like you're living it. There's no need. But just even going through that really helps me just to say, oh, okay, right, let's be really clear around what it is that I'm feeling. And then, you know, I love this. This is the difference between me and Cheryl. So I just sit in it for a little bit. So I give myself 15 minutes. I normally set myself a timer, and I let myself be as, let's say, I let myself feel as inadequate as I want to for 15 minutes. And I normally find I can't manage 15 minutes. I can manage probably 3 and then it ebbs away, you know? So mine is very much around identifying it, sitting in it, recognizing it, and saying that's okay to feel that. Whereas I think you do slightly different things, don't you?
Yeah, I think definitely the identifying it and the analysing it, I think for me, so for me personally, I tend to rationalise my way out of fears, if that makes sense. So I try to make sense of it. I try to bring some logic to it. I guess to try to gain a sense of proportion to what the thing is, because often with fears, particularly if, you know, the longer you don't face them, the bigger they grow, like the bigger they grow in your mind. So there is something about how do you kind of just bring it back to kind of what it is. And by analysing it, and I'm literally doing that, analysing it, I think you can literally shrink it back down so it's like teeny tiny. So that for me is quite important. I think the other one is, for me, I often look at how other people have handled it, or the fact that other people have gotten through it. So, you know, even something, I'm going to go like something quite physical, even something like childbirth, say, is very, you know, quite scary to some people. But you sort of think about it, you think, well, loads of people have been through that, you know, loads of people have gone through it. So, so for me, that often helps, thinking actually other people have done it, and you know, nothing bad happened to them. You know, they got through
bigger dummies than you have got through this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting as well, isn't it? Around and we know one of the reasons we wanted to do the fear thing at the moment is, you know, we all feel afraid, and I know there are some people who have, you know, lost their jobs during this time. You know, the employment market looks really different for all of us, but you know, for people who've lost their jobs, are really afraid they can't pay bills, all that type of stuff. We get it, and we're going to be doing some different workshops and things to kind of help you guys on that. Not to say let's do your CV, because everyone and his aunt is offering to do that, but to say actually how do you utilize this time and kind of get your confidence back to move forward. But there is something around recognizing that fear is in some cases justified. Like, it's okay to feel afraid, right? It's okay. It's what's kept us alive. And giving yourself that recognition of, you know what, this is scary, and that's okay. It just is, because we don't know what's going to happen. And there was something brilliant you said earlier, where often our fear is around a projection of what we think is going to happen in the future. However, as you said something brilliant, which neither of us can be able to remember, but you basically said, like, past, you know, what's happened before is not a great indicator of what can happen.
Absolutely. At the moment, you know, because we're talking about like recessions and that sort of thing, and I think if anything, so we're talking about like the 2007 2008 crash, and one of the reflections on that, or one of the learnings that came out of that, you know, from the analysts and stuff, was that recession wasn't like any of the ones before. And what we've seen actually after that is a period of a long period of kind of like very low growth. And the reality is that because of because of the changing nature of the world, globalization, all of that sort of thing, the past is not a good indicator of the future. Now that in itself is scary, but it's the reality that we live in. So actually there is something about, if we can learn that resilience and how to manage the fear and still ride the waves, you know, it's kind of what we've got to do as a coping mechanism, because I think that is the future. I think if anything, the current virus outbreak has taught us that actually we've got to, I used to work with these consultants, you know, we've both worked with a lot of consultants over the time. There were these particular set of consultants, and I won't say which ones, but one of their favorite sayings was embrace the ambiguity. And I hate to say it, but I think for once they're actually right, because I think life certainly at the moment, but going forward, is going to continue to be more ambiguous. Because it's so complex. You know, we're in a very complex world, and it's so connected and all those kinds of things. So I think there is something about a coping mechanism with fear. If we start to get more used to ambiguity and start to kind of have coping mechanisms around that, I think that will help.
Yeah, and I think, you know, all the things that we thought, because the opposite of fear is safety, right?
Yeah.
And safety actually for me can often feel like stagnation.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've talked before about this balance between freedom and safety, right? The flip side of that is fear and stagnation. So, you know, there's a flip side to everything. And I think you're absolutely right. I think this ambiguity is forcing us to think differently, because we don't know, you know, that job that we rely on that we don't particularly like, but it keeps our bills paid. What happens when that's gone? You know, that family that, you know, we rely on to look after us, but actually we're really arguing under pressure. How does that look like? You know, that all the things that we thought were givens have kind of shifted. And, you know, I think it's perfectly natural to feel the fear in that time, but I think you're absolutely right. This is also a time for some great self-reflection, which I know we're going to lead people through, to try and just get clear around it, and also to avoid. So I'm brilliant at this. You know, I'm the best catastrophizer in the world, don't you? So, you know, I'm really good at it. So what I often do, and I'll often bring this to Cheryl after I've done it, so she can hear how I've done it, is I'll get really afraid and I'll identify what the fear is, and I'll sit in it for those 3 minutes. And in those 3 minutes, what has happened for me is I've never worked again. I've lost my house. I've lost everybody close to me. I've lost everything that matters to me, and I'm living on the street. By that point, I kind of wake myself up and I'm like, no, that isn't happening. And I often do talk to you about it, don't I? So I had a nice little 2-minute catastrophize, and then I almost kind of got out of my system. And there is something around saying, when you feel yourself starting to do that catastrophizing, either give yourself the time to sit in it, take it all the way through to the nth degree where you realize it's not going to happen, or snap yourself out of it at the beginning and say, what do I know in this moment? Because fear is based on predictions of the future, and the truth is the only thing we know is this exact moment.
And the fear is, but and that leads us on, I think, really nicely to optimism, because Gary Vaynerchuk did a post about 3 or 4 weeks ago, so probably just before this thing broke, so it was nothing to do with the current situation, but he was talking about cynicism. And it's a really, really good post, actually. I mean, it's a clip from, you know, some Q&A that he's done, but he basically is saying it's much safer to be cynical, you know, and it's really easy to be cynical, and it takes a lot of courage to be optimistic. Now, what we're not talking about, and I think we've got a session where we're going to talk about toxic positivity.
We absolutely are.
We're not talking about toxic positivity, but I'd like to actually maybe use this as an example. So as we were saying, so I've got some cousins in Canada that I was talking to at the weekend, an aunt and some cousins. And I think if I compare, so I think you've got us Brits who are probably sort of fairly realistic / cynical, right, on the one hand side. You then probably got our American cousins who are tend to be quite positive and yay, everything's great. And Sheryl Sandberg talks about this in her book Option B, which obviously we're doing on Thursday. And then I think the Canadians probably sit nicely in the middle, actually, you know, because so they've been in lockdown for longer than we have, so they took this pretty seriously as soon as it hit. They weren't being cynical, they were just, you know what, this is really serious, let's get you know, things together. But they're not as downbeat necessarily, you know, they don't fall into that downward spiral that comes with the cynicism and the negativity. They just stay very, very straight, very realistic, but still quite optimistic. And I think that would be a really great mindset to adopt, you know.
And actually, you know what, I think that is probably a really great place for us to leave it on, because that mindset of how you get there, you know, a lot of the work that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks or months or however long while we're doing this format, we're going to be sharing a load of materials with you guys, and a load of kind of exercises around exactly how to do that. How can you be the Canada? How can you be the Canada of your own life, right?
Be the Canada.
Be more Canada. So we know this is hard. We see that fear, we acknowledge it, and then we take reasonable steps in which to deal with that and to kind of safeguard ourselves. Yeah. So
on Thursday we've got the book club where we're doing Option B by Sheryl Sandberg, which I think is brilliant for now in terms of developing that resilience. Because I think if you have got that resilience, that kind of, I guess it's something in your arsenal to have to counteract, you know, the fear of kind of what may happen. So this Thursday, Option B.
Yep, absolutely. And we're going to be doing more and more kind of topics, and thank you, because some of you have kind of messaged us and, you know, said that you'd like to come in and join us for chat. So we're going to be having some special guest stars zooming in as well. Be nice if we can divide the screen up. It's not just my huge face. But yeah, you know, I just kind of wanted to say to a lot of people, I know that a lot of people are feeling really afraid, right? And I know what fear feels like, because my God, you know, I for a long part of my life have been a very fearful person. And I'm just going to say to you, feeling afraid of it before it happens neither stops it from happening nor calls it to you.
Exactly.
And I know it feels hard, but we are more connected than ever, and no one is on their own. And, you know, we hope that some of you will let us know what you thought, and, you know, how afraid you feel at the moment, or not. Maybe you're just loving it, you know. And if you are just loving it, be conscious of the people who are not. Just tiny little bit. Tiny little bit for everybody who is, you know, saying, oh my God, it's amazing, I'm loving being locked down with my kids and husband, it's fantastic, and my job's stable, and, you know, and our investments are booming. Just open your mind a tiny little bit for the people who are losing people, feeling very afraid. You know, seeing their world change. Loads of empathy at the moment. That's what we're looking for. And with that, I think that's a great goodbye.
That's a wrap. See you next time.
Bye.
See ya. Bye.